Hey folks, welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. Thank you for tuning in as always. I hope you're having a good day wherever you are. If it's a good night, if it's a late night, I hope it's a wild and a memorable one. And if it isn't, then let me break you back into the morning with my soothing droning voice. That's actually something I received a compliment on. A recent guest that I had on the show, Ryan Gurian, described my voice as something that he would want to bottle and drizzle over pancakes. So thank you, Ryan. I appreciate the compliment. On the show today, this is a musical episode. On the show today, we have singer and guitarist Mike Borchardt. Mike plays in a band called Nihiloceros, and you'll probably hear him correct me a couple times and me get the pronunciation of the name wrong. But he's the singer-guitarist for Nihiloceros, and he is the guitarist in a band called Treads here in New York City. And he's one of the few musicians that I know in New York, and I wanted to kind of talk to him about his experience being a working musician in New York. And he has had some crazy experiences in his life. And if you've ever seen or are aware of the concept of the movie This Is Spinal Tap, some of the stories he tells me are just wild. And also a couple of things he tells me about as far as him getting sober, which he's at 10 years. Congratulations, Mike. Really cut to the crux of the theme of the show, which is being moments of being awesome and disaster, and then how you get through those disastrous moments, because you can't always predict for them. And I definitely know that I've had moments like that where I've not seen the light at the end of the tunnel. But for me personally, at least, I've always had a focus on things that I know make me happy in the moment, as well as a goal I wanted to achieve, and then just knowing that maintaining was part of the strength to doing that. And even sometimes, the simple act of getting up out of bed and getting through the day was a victory. So it was great to kind of talk to Mike. It's a struggle and a hard working hustle in a different way from comedy, but it isn't all that different. And I was actually in bands for a long time before I started comedy, so I started getting that itch again to want to play live again. So when you'll hear me ask him about that as well. So if you're a musician in New York, this is I feel like this will be a useful episode for you. So guys, thank you again so much for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to tell a friend. You can leave a rating on iTunes or subscribe, or if you're on Stitcher, we're on iTunes and Stitcher. You can add us to your favorites playlist. That helps the show grow, and I would really appreciate. It means so much to me that you would take the time to do that, because it's a busy lifestyle that most of us live now, and the fact that I made something that it means enough to you that you would want to share it with someone else, that's the world, man. That's what I'm trying to create. So thank you again. You can follow me on Twitter at Comic Will Carey. You can follow the podcast at AwesomeDPod. If you want me to come do stand up in your city, message me. We'll figure it out. I would love to come to your town, do your shows, do your podcast. If I'm coming to your city, I'd love to hear from you. So guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And let's go to my chat with Mike Borchardt. And I mean, the very freeing thing for me, at least, was realizing that even though I was living by the code of punk rock for so long, and then realizing the hypocrisy in that code also, and then having that self-awareness, I was very freed up by. Yeah. Because punks can be as close-minded as the people they're rebelling against.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the whole thing started, I think people were a little bit more. If you look at, especially if you it's funny looking at those old footage of like 70s New York punk or like 70s British punk. You see like so many like normal looking people
Yeah.
at those shows, like with like white collar shirts and like, you know, like slacks and whatever. Because at that time it was really just rebelling against what was going on before it became like a fashion and this like, you know, like safety pin ethos that everyone sort of turned it into, where then it became like you're not punk enough to be punk, and it's like that was the opposite of what the entire thing was about in the first place.
100%. 100%. I saw, and one time I saw a gutter punk on the train. He got on, you know, had the whole thing, you know, the dreadlocks and the dog and the whole thing. And the guitar, he's got a guitar, and the song he plays is "Time of Your Life" by Green Day. I thought that was just such a fitting metaphor for if you really want to stick to the fucking sellout punk rock ethos, you're gonna end up playing the more popular song on the train for spare change.
Yeah,
man.
exactly, because that's the one that people are gonna know.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious. I kind of want to trace this because I've listened to, how's your one band pronounced? Nihiloceros? Nihiloceros.
It's like nihilism and rhinoceros. If it were,
I was thinking that.
Yeah,
I was thinking.
Or it depends on how you pronounce like nihil or nihil. If you pronounce all the syllables, then you could say, like some people say like nihiloceros. But if you say nihilism, like nihilism instead of nihilism, then it's however you pronounce nihil, and then the second half of rhinoceros.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I listened to all of that stuff. I haven't listened to any of Treads, but I'm interested in tracing your punk rock through line.
Okay.
Where did you grow up?
Chicago.
Chicago. What part?
North side. I went to school on the south side, but I grew up the north side of the city. Like I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Chicago?
I've been there once.
Okay. I grew up in Uptown, which is a neighborhood on the north side, like by the Aragon and the Riviera.
Okay.
The Uptown Theater, like the big old like movie theaters and like the Green Mill, which was like Al Capone and Charlie Chaplin's bar. So is that part of town that back the turn of the century was like the outskirts of the city where people would go to see like ballroom shows and like drink at the speakeasies and whatever.
Right.
And then as the city grew, it just ended up being, it's like one of the northern neighborhoods on the north side of the city before you get like to like Rogers Park and Evanston, and then you're in the suburbs.
Gotcha. So you're like the northern tip of the city proper.
Yeah, I'm like I'm like 3 neighborhoods away from the northernmost part of Chicago proper.
Gotcha. And what was your family life growing up? Did you have siblings?
I have a younger brother who's just about 4 years younger than me. My parents split up when I was super young. So I remember when my parents were together. My brother never actually lived with my dad in the house because he was sort of born after they split. And then my dad lived out in the suburbs of Chicago, like south suburbs, and we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in the city, like a basement 1-bedroom apartment, me, my mom, and my brother. So yeah, that was sort of, but then my mom worked on the south side, like over in like Bridgeport, which is like, you know, south neighborhood. So because we took the L to, you know, the train to school and everything, and her to go to work, like I actually didn't go. I didn't go to any of the neighborhood schools in my neighborhood. We actually took the L all the way across Chicago to like a Catholic grade school on the south side of Chicago, so that I would be close to my mom's office.
Gotcha. So that's a lot of time on the train if you're going from the north to the
I mean,
south.
that's from like, that's probably about an hour plus every day.
Yeah. And my understanding of Chicago, at least from like popular culture, is that there's like a real stark like racial divide between the north and the south.
There is. I mean, the south side is the quote unquote bad neighborhood, which is, you know, more primarily minorities and African Americans, and you know that's what it's like known for. But Chicago more so in that regard. I think what you're referencing is there's really stark neighborhood differences. So like in Bridgeport on the south side, but not like south side where I went to grade school, was very like Italian and the mob, and so it was like in Bridgeport it was Italians, and then like you know, like up north you have like the Polish, and then like you cross the street, then all of a sudden you're like in like the Indian part of town and all that stuff. And it's very like the neighborhoods are very like, it's a lot like New York, but less so than like the gentrified parts of the boroughs, the outer boroughs that you know, all of a sudden it's like, well, this used to be Hispanic, but now it's this. It's like in Chicago, it's like we've been Italian or Irish or whatever for like 300 years, and that's who lives here.
Interesting, because my only experience of the South Side is that's where Chinatown in Chicago is, and I love Chicago's Chinatown. There's some good food down there.
Yeah.
So did you kind of did you experience any of that like rougher side of South Side when you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, because I used my mom was 19 when I was born, so she was like raising us while working full time, and so she had a baby going to work and going on jobs, and then when my brother was born, I was about to turn 4, and I was in like preschool then, but there was still a lot of like, then she had him at work, and she would take us to school, and we would have to after school either go to like this after school program or go back to her office, and then or she'd come get us because we were like teeny children. But we would go on a lot of job sites, like, and she was in like, it was like electrical contracting and like architecture stuff that her dad's company did. So we would go into like various like neighborhoods and stuff on the South Side for like job sites, and there was some rough stuff, and even our neighborhood on the north side in the 80s was, I mean, it was like bad news, like people getting shot and stuff. All that. I mean, it's definitely a lot nicer now. My brother actually lives like 3 blocks away. He didn't just move 3 blocks, like he moved all over, but now he just purchased a condo like 3 blocks away from where we grew up as kids. Yeah.
Oh, that's like a victory lap almost.
Totally different neighborhood now too. Like there's still a couple of rough spots, but Uptown 2019 is night and day from how it was in the like the mid 80s.
Oh my God, yeah. I even have that just from, only been in New York for almost 9 years, and I remember Sunset Park, like I was living there when it was not gentrified.
Right.
And now I think a real estate agent would call it like Souther Slope.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's cool. I always am a little envious of people who grew up in major cities because I'm from the boonies, so it was like very white, and
you're from outside of Baltimore, right?
Yeah, I'm about an hour south of Baltimore.
Okay.
In Calvert County,
right?
Which is again a great kind of town for to get into pop punk and learn that you don't want to live there,
right? Right.
But I'd always thought of pop punk specifically as like this born out of suburban boredom. So I'm curious how you found. I'm curious, like when you were in high school, what kind of kid were you? Were you the music kid early on, or did that take time to develop?
I think I wanted to be the music kid. Because I also went to high school in St. Louis. So I grew up in Chicago, moved to St. Louis for my high school years, and then moved back to Chicago for college. So I think I spent, because again, when I was a kid, I lived so far away from where I went to school, and all my friends, like they all lived like 3 blocks away from the school, and so I would like never. I didn't play sports because I wasn't around for any of like the sporting events. There's no after school, like so I saw kids at school and I had friends at school, but I didn't have any friends that I could hang out with.
Sure.
And then at my neighborhood, it was a really shitty neighborhood, so like we weren't allowed outside of the courtyard, which was a gated courtyard. So like I really didn't have any like friends to hang out with in like my regular life outside of school. And then I moved to St. Louis.
What was St. Louis like for you?
I don't know. I hesitate to say I hate St. Louis because I don't hate St. Louis. I love going back there to play. I have a lot of friends there. But it's not it kind of does. St. Louis is one of those places that it's a city, right? And it wants to be a big city, but it's sort of like, it used to be a big deal, like when the Mississippi River mattered and stuff.
Right.
Like it was slated to be, I mean, it was the first big city. It was like Louisiana, like, New Orleans at the bottom of the river, and St. Louis, and like, you know. So it was one of those big booming towns at the time when there was like 9 places to live in a city in the United States. But then, and like as culture and industrial revolutions and things changed, it just sort of like stagnated. I think it was like resting on its own laurels. And then it definitely has that mentality of like, well, we're St. Louis. We're like a big city. We're like a big deal. Pay attention to us. And I think I don't know, at least from my experience, a lot of like my big problem moving to St. Louis was once they found out I was from Chicago, it was like, oh, big city boy coming down here. And I'm like, guys, like I didn't have any friends in Chicago. Like now I don't have any friends here because like you guys are all like, oh, Mr. Chicago is coming to grace us with his presence. And I'm just like, dude, seriously, I'm just like this kid that wants to like, connect with people. So that's how I was in high school. Was then I was like, okay, now I live in the suburbs outside of St. Louis, and I have friends and people have cars and we can do stuff. But like it was like everyone had already had these like groups and like cliques that they grew up with, and like I was late to playing sports, so I sucked at sports, and like I didn't have any interest. I took piano when I was a kid for like 2 years, which is where all my music knowledge comes from. But I like quit it. Like I took it when I was like 5 and 6, and then didn't play another instrument for like 10 years, right? So I didn't have music, I didn't have sports, like I didn't really know people. So I sort of just like, while I got along with a lot of people in high school, I didn't really have any close friends until like I sort of connected with this group of people that were all the sort of the people that didn't belong in another group, right? So I had like a friend who had moved from Cincinnati to St. Louis, and another friend that lived like way far outside of St. Louis. So like he wasn't connected to really, he had friends in his neighborhood, but not people down by us. So we had this little group of people that were all kind of different and didn't really fit in anywhere.
Your island of misfit toys.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was like a Jesuit Catholic school. So it was an all boys school to boot, right?
Right.
So like, socializing with like girls was like a whole other outside thing that you had to do, not at school. So I'm already like 6 steps behind the game and everything. Right. Which is weird. And then you're going to school with there's like a lot of masculinity and like teenage hormones that are like, very one-sided and like, it's very macho, right? Which is not me. Yeah. And then one of those friends, actually, the way I got back into music, because we needed an outlet, there's like 3 things that you can do in St. Louis. You can you can go to a show, but there weren't a lot of like all ages shows to go to. There's a handful of clubs back then that, you could go see a show. You could go to the movies, you could go bowling, and then you could like do those things again. Like that was kind of like,
that sounds like my hometown, because it was the movies, bowling, which you had to book in advance because it would fill up on weekends.
Right.
Or occasionally there were 4, how I discovered live music. There was like 4 or 5 bands that would play at like the Armory, which was always lame because like the Armory guys were like super strict and wouldn't let you have fun.
Right.
And the Volunteer Firehouse, which they'd let you do anything.
Yeah.
So and that scene was so important. So St. Louis, did it have what you would call a punk rock scene? I don't even know if labeling you as a punk or is even accurate.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like, I came out of that, and that's like the ethos that I sort of subscribed to in my younger years, and it's always been sort of a musical springboard for like everything I create artistically. But I've always tried to strive to be sort of on the outskirts of that too, because like
totally
regurgitating ideas that have been like, to me there hasn't been for longer than I've been playing music anything punk rock about playing like 3-chord punk rock, because everyone's done it a million times, and that's no longer. Contrary to the movement, right? So
yeah,
like just
it's a form,
right? Exactly, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's definitely become a mainstream genre that is like like folk music or blues, or it's no longer, at least in a lot of ways,
it's not the new subversive thing anymore.
And to me, it's always been more about like the mentality behind it. So like I remember I made a big case when like Belle and Sebastian first came out, like when I like late high school, early college, and some of the stuff that they were doing at the time, at least, was like. And I got I'm saying 2 things at the same time.
It's all good.
Belle and Sebastian, I made a case that they were like one of the punkest bands, and they're like, that's not punk rock. I'm like, they're doing stuff that like stuff you're not listening to, at least stuff that I'm familiar with as like a 16, 17-year-old have heard. I'm like, they're like breaking ground here, right?
Yeah.
Bob Dylan, I got into a huge argument with this like punk purist about how, because I was like, Bob Dylan's like punk as fuck, and they're like, well, he can't be punk as fuck because like he was, and I was referencing like him back in the 60s, and they're like, well, it wasn't even a term yet, he predated the, I'm like, that's just like language that we've attached to something, but it's never been about the music. It's always been about like, so in that regard, I still consider myself a punk, but I try not to write 3-chord punk rock,
Yeah, I know, and I think your stuff kind of transcends that a little bit. I think you have like very melodic but also screechy guitar solos in the stuff I've listened to. I would also describe your stuff as I wouldn't call it garage rock, but I would say it's very like up-tempo melodic, like power pop almost.
Yeah.
Or I would even say, this might be a bit of a stretch, are you familiar with the band Mineral?
No.
So they've reunited and did some shows, but they were like one of like the prototypical emo bands in Austin, Texas in the 90s. You remind me of them your singing voice kind of reminds me of the lead singer if he like got on key a little bit and they had a little bit more distortion.
Okay.
So I mean it as a compliment. I was listening to to I guess you were called Samantha back then.
We were. That was an old incarnation of this band, and it's funny. I'll give you the short version of that story for the name switch, because when I started that band was like years ago with different people, and at the time, like one of the people in the band was bisexual, one of the people in the band was transgendered, and I cross dressed and I wore makeup. We were a little glammier. Like there was an element to that where at the time, especially in Chicago, there was this whole like machismo like thing with bands, and so like I wanted to have a band that had a feminine name that sort of embodied the fact that, you know, like music isn't just a bunch of dudes, right? And
right.
And so like we sort of had a, you know, we weren't all just like three white dudes, like three straight white dudes in a band, right? Mm-hmm. So I sort of played on that to sort of play against what like there was too much of in that scene in Chicago, like Midwest macho like dude rock.
Totally.
And then that band moved to New York and sort of changed people, and so that was still just a carryover from that. But as our culture changed, it sort of started to be we weren't getting shows because people were like, I'm uncomfortable with the name because like and then at that point it was like three white guys in a band, right?
Right.
And they're like, that seems like you're being offensive to like, you know, like gender, like and that
like you're being insensitive.
And I was like, no, that's that's exactly the reason why I like started that in the first place. So at first I sort of offended me, but at the same time I'm like, and at that point like the music had changed, the members had changed, so I was like, we should change it to a new, because it's a new band now, right?
Right.
But at first I was like intensed by the fact that like the very thing that I was like trying to make a statement about at the time had such evolved to this thing where like now it's like I'm the person doing the thing that I was speaking out against, completely unintentionally. But I was sort of glad, and the thing that made me happy, and I was like cool with doing the name flip and not like, you know, like hanging on that as like some sort of like thorn in my side, is that it was cool that our culture has changed to such that the thing that at a time I felt that I needed to do, like clearly no longer needed to be said or done. You know what I mean? And I thought that was cool. So that's the story behind the name switch and the evolution there.
Gotcha. Makes total sense, because again, if it's different, then you can go, oh, okay, this name has run its course. I can do something else.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to high school in St. Louis. You got your Merry Band of Misfits.
Yep.
Do you find when do you find the guitar? Does that happen in St. Louis, or does that happen when you get back to Chicago?
Happens in St. Louis. So my best friend in high school, his dad is an artist, and so like he's big on like and he's a guitar player and all this stuff. He's a really really great player.
Yeah.
But I spent a lot of time in his house, and we would hang out all the time, and like I would eat dinner over there and spend the night and like blah blah blah. So at one point, I don't remember how it sort of turned about, but he played guitar, and I was like, I want to play guitar because playing guitar is cool, and I want to start a band, and I want to like do all this stuff. And it sort of instilled that. I'm like, this is what I'm going to use to like, you know, get what I want to say out into the world. So we used to print up tabs on the computer to like learn how to play like a bunch of punk songs.
Sure.
And his sister had him and his dad bought him and his sister these two acoustic guitars for like $100 used at a store, like the exact same like one, right? But there were like two of them. They're like $100 they're used. So like Nick, my friend, had one, and then his sister had another one, and his sister never played it. And then she ended up moving back to Cincinnati, I think, to live with her mom, or their mom.
Gotcha.
And so I bought the acoustic guitar, I think I was like 15, off of either his dad or him or whoever. I gave someone $100 or like $75.
Yeah.
So then I had that guitar, which is still the acoustic guitar that not the one I have here, but the one that I play to this day. If you've seen it with all the stickers and crap. Yeah. So that's my first guitar. And then I actually ended up getting like my first electric was one that my uncle won in a poker game, and like all this stuff is this old blues thing. It was a piece of crap, but I loved it when I got it. So anyway, my friend Nick taught me how to play guitar, and we used to learn like every like 3-chord song that we could get our hands on, and that's sort of how that happened. And then I sort of took that. I was like, I would play music with people in high school and never really getting like a band off the ground. And then when I moved back to Chicago for college, that's when things started like, you know,
kind of coming.
And I was writing, and we started like playing shows, and I started having like real bands and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. What were some of those early songs you were learning to teach yourself guitar?
Oh man, like some of it, there was like we learned because at the Green Day has always been one of my favorite bands, like early on from when I was a kid. But like everything, so like Green Day was probably the first stuff that I learned to play right because like they're like power chords. But I mean, everything I learned was like Elastica songs and Nirvana and. Placebo, and then all the pop punk stuff like Green Day and like Squirt Gun and all that stuff, which probably was the stuff that I learned quicker because they were easier to play. But I sort of use that as a springboard to like be like, oh, now I can play. I understand how chords work now, and that's why this. So then I could start playing chords that were in like some of the stuff that I was into like a few years earlier from like the early '90s. And then I mean, it's funny like but then at the same time too, because at that point I was just consuming as much music. And it was like whatever song that we heard that we were like we could probably play that, like songs by like the Wallflowers and like anything that was like on the radio where I was like, I think that Save Tonight, that Eagle Eye Cherry song.
I love that song.
Like I was like I want to learn to play that because I think that's one chord progression all the way through. So like everything that I could like figure out how to learn, I would try to learn. At that point I could like play everything you could think of. It's funny now, people ask me to like be like, oh, like play this cover, and I was like, I don't know, play anyone else's songs anymore because I don't learn other people's songs.
Yeah, I always mostly just wrote stuff where if I was learning something, I was learning something I really wanted to learn. I think the first song I ever sat down and learned all the way through because I wanted to learn all the parts was, do you remember the new metal band Trust Company?
I played with Trust Company.
You did?
Mm-hmm. One of my old bands, yeah.
How are those guys?
They didn't talk to us.
Really?
We just opened for them, and like I mean, they seemed fine.
Yeah, it was that song Downfall that was their big hit, which I still listen to. I think it still holds up. I don't think they quite got the attention that they deserved. I think they were a lot better than like some of the other bands that came out in the wave of.
Weren't they on tour with Disturbed?
They might have been. They tend to get lumped in with like the new metal.
They are
scene.
right, but I remember when we played with them, it was like one date they had off of on tour with like Disturbed or someone like that. Or maybe it was Stained, but it was somebody like that.
And some other like post grunge band. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Okay, so you get back, and I was just like down on it, like bounce riffs.
Yeah,
I was just so into those. Okay, so you get back to Chicago, and you have this template, like, because when you learn a power chord and you learn that you can go like make box patterns, and basically those sound good together.
Yeah,
that's like songwriting 101.
Exactly, and that's where learning all of that. That's why learning all the power chords for like punk songs was like. You can throw a few of these together, and like this sounds like the song that you know, and then that would then coupled with the fact that I still remembered how music theory worked from piano when I was a kid.
Right,
I was like,
right.
Okay, so based off E chords and A chords, now I can play all these bar chords, and you can simplify them into power chords. But then you would use that knowledge to learn like something more complicated, like a Placebo song, and then you would understand like why does this chord sound weird? Oh, because they either added or subtracted or moved this note, and then you start learning these other chord shapes, and it's like from those building blocks are where you get from like just learning like punk tabs to like understanding like cool chord sounds to then being like, oh, I want to incorporate this into something that I'm trying to make, and that's where like songwriting started for me. Gotcha.
So is that knowledge of music theory for piano from when you were early on incorporated in with the punk rock? So that's I just love that stuck with you from when you were doing piano when you were 2. That's amazing.
Well, that's about the only thing that because I always played, and I still do to this day. I write on piano sometimes, like I come up with like melodies and stuff, and certain chord changes that I wouldn't write, which I'll play on guitar when it's a song, right? But I think about music differently when it's instead of being stacked octaves, you're looking at like a linear octave pattern, right? So I still will write on piano, but I would never perform piano because I don't play chords right. I use the wrong fingers. I have like small like little hands, so like I'm not suited for piano. But really, the only thing that's ever stuck with me in like the 25 years since this has been a thing is just like sort of like understanding like how the notes work.
Right.
That's like it.
So you get back to Chicago and you get into college. What did you study?
English, criminal justice, and fine arts.
That's a pretty good trifecta.
It's a weird trifecta. I wanted to be a lawyer, or I thought I wanted to be a lawyer.
Like a really verbose lawyer.
Yeah, well, it was really just like it was. I ran and I don't know. Maybe, I don't know why I thought this, but I knew what being a lawyer entails. Like, there's a lot of like work and research, right? But
Right.
I think at that time, like in the late '90s, early 2000s, there was a lot of like those like court shows like The
Right.
Practice and Boston Legal and like Law and Order, and you see all these, and like even in movies you see all these great like you're gonna get up there and argue a point, and then it's just like it's so
Yeah.
dramatic and cool that I'm like,
Right.
I want to do that, and like I'll get into that kind of law, right? I'll do like weird criminal law and it'll be great. And so then obviously like I had an English teacher that I really liked, and English is one of the good majors to go into law and a couple of criminal justice. But then as a like a musician and an artist, I also like was like, well, I don't want really, this stuff is like, this is the boring part. I want to do this other thing.
Yeah.
So but at some point along the way, I like decided I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. I just wanted to play music. So I like wish I could have like gone back and taken more art classes, but it's like, yeah, you only have a couple like semesters left, and this is what I am now, right?
Right. And that's when you started, like, music started like becoming a thing, and you started playing shows around during this time as well.
Pretty quickly on. It was during that process. Freshman year, I started a band with some guys in my dorm. And like in the other dorms, and like so, and then we found a drummer who was a few years older than us who had an apartment. We would practice there, and like he had a drum kit and like a 4-track recorder, and then my other guitarist had like Cool Edit Pro on his computer, so we were like doing like digital stuff and tape stuff, and like working and saving money to like go into like studio and like record on tape and all this stuff. So yeah, I think we started playing house parties. Which are pretty well attended, which is like, because college shows are fun when you're in college.
Totally.
So we started playing house shows my freshman year, and then by like sophomore year, when we were still well under 21, so we had to have been like 19, we started playing, because we used to have to still get the stamp or the bracelet that you guys are underage. We started playing our first Chicago like venue shows, which was like at the time. And eventually people started coming. At first, like, we played to like 5 people, but it was still like the coolest thing in the world. Where
Sure.
we're like there's a stage and there's monitors and you're plugging stuff in, and like, yeah.
Oh, the first like talent show I played in high school, I felt like a baller. I was
Yeah.
just like up there. I had my Telecaster and I was wearing my starting line hoodie.
Yeah.
And I was just ready to go, man. That's awesome. Did you ever play the Fireside Bowl?
Yeah.
How are those shows? I've heard
Those were amazing. And I can't remember. I know they reopened, and then I don't know if they're still open. So do you know
I think they are. Alistair just shot their music video
Gotcha.
there.
Because I've been in there. So the story of the Fireside. So I moved back to Chicago. When I lived in Chicago before, I was I mean, they had some all ages stuff, but a lot of them were like 16 plus, 18 plus, and I was in high school in St. Louis at the time.
Right.
So like I knew of Fireside Bowl, but then I lived in St. Louis, and then I moved back to Chicago, and Fireside Bowl is like Fireside Bowl was like is what all the DIY venues, at least at the time, in Brooklyn are trying to be, because there was literally like a kick-ass scene where people would just go any night of the week to just see. They didn't even know, like, there was flyers and stuff everywhere, so you knew it was playing, but sometimes you didn't know it was playing. You're just like, let's go to the Fireside Bowl. Not like, oh, I know my friend is playing on Tuesday, so I'm going to go catch his set.
You're just gonna go and
just
be
go.
like, you would just go,
and it was packed, and it was this run-down bowling alley, and it was falling apart, and like, I mean, everyone contributed to the destruction of that place. Like, I remember one time I was like up on the bass drum and I shoved my guitar through the ceiling and pulled a seal tiling. We played with Dillinger 4 a couple of shows in Wisconsin and in Chicago, and at the Fireside Bowl, Patty got out. He made some comment where they came out like, we're Dillinger 4 and collectively we're over 1,000 pounds or something like that. They play this rip-roaring set. They're drunk as shit. Patty gets off the stage, because the bathrooms are like right next to the stage. It's like a bowling alley. The bowling alleys are here. The stage is here, and the bathrooms are just right here. So he got off and like pushed through the crowd, went into the bathroom with the door open, and did like a handstand into the toilet, and like ripped something out of the wall of that place. Every show, something broke at that place, and it was amazing. And that's where we like the dudes from Alkaline Trio. We would be there. We eventually played with Alkaline Trio, but that's where they got their start. All like Blink-182 came and played the Fireside Bowl.
Oh, cool!
It was such a great place. And then ever since I had moved back to Chicago, there was always this like, since the first day I ever went to the Fireside Bowl, for like years, it was like, the city's trying to shut down the Fireside Bowl. The city's trying to shut down. This could be the last 2 months of the Fireside Bowl.
Right.
So and people were concerned, but after a long enough period of time, or like it's MP Show's best venue. It's like hands down like the scene in Chicago is at the Fireside Bowl.
Yeah.
It's never going to close, and they've been saying this for like however many years now. So after like 6 years of me living back in Chicago and playing the Fireside Bowl and going to shows at the Fireside Bowl and all that, eventually they actually closed, and it was like devastating. Like everyone, and myself included, was like absolutely crushed, and it was like a huge detriment to the scene, and it was awful. And then there's all these other venues you play other places, but it's like when we missed the Fireside Bowl.
Yeah.
Then it might have been I moved to LA for a year too, and when I think it might have been after I moved back from LA, they reopened the Fireside Bowl under like new management, not affiliated with the original like company that like ran those shows.
Right.
But they cleaned it up. Like I went there like twice, and they opened up the bowling alleys again. Like, cause you used to kind of be able to bowl sometimes, but it was just like for like shits because like none of the lanes were all broken and shit was missing. So they actually like redid all the bowling alleys, painted everything, like remodeled the whole place, and they were like, and sometimes we're gonna put on a couple of shows. So I walked in there, I think twice, and the second time I was just like, this isn't my Fireside Bowl. I don't even want to be in here anymore. But again, that was like and then I moved to New York, and I've been back to Chicago, but I haven't been back to the Fireside Bowl, so I wasn't sure if it was still operating.
I think
capacity.
I don't know if they still do shows there, but it's still a functioning bowling alley, I believe. I don't think it's changed at all since it opened in the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
Just seeing you get nostalgic for like the destruction of DIY punk shows.
Yeah.
It makes me think of like when people wax nostalgic for Action Park.
Yeah.
In New Jersey, that amusement park that had no rules and people would get hurt and die all the time.
Yeah.
And then it reopened and is like, nah, it's not the same.
No.
There are rules now. I don't like it.
Yep.
You moved to LA for a year. Was that a good decision in retrospect, or
it was a decision that had to be made. Like under the same set of circumstances, I would have done the same thing. That came about from our drummer at the time. We had a series of drummers that we rolled through in Chicago. We fired one didn't work out. Something with another one, I don't remember. But I think it was our fourth drummer. He was amazing, right? So he was from Kansas City. He moved to Chicago. He was going to school.
Yeah.
Amazing drummer. And we're the best we've ever sounded. Like we're playing the best shows that we've ever played. We're sounding better than we ever have. And then he makes this announcement that he's moving to LA for music school because he got into this like prestigious program and like,
gotcha.
So, like he's this amazing drummer, and so like I got to take this opportunity. So we were faced with the decision of because we didn't really want to go to LA because we love Chicago and we're doing well here, and like I'll go play LA, but I don't necessarily want to move across the country, right?
Sure.
So he's like, well, I'm going. Just wanted to give you guys enough of a heads up if you need to find somebody else. So we decide, okay, instead of staying here and trying to find another drummer, we have like magic going on with this combination of people.
Yeah.
We're graduating from college. If there was ever a time to like just be like, fuck it and go somewhere else, now is that time, right? So we're like 21 and we're like, all right, cool, we're gonna move to LA. We go to LA, we find an apartment, come back to Chicago, start packing up our stuff. He goes back to Kansas City to go like pack up stuff at like his parents' house and collect some stuff because he's gonna go out there. We I think we went to LA first. So we drive across the country to LA and we have an apartment in West Hollywood. We move in. He's supposed to be there like in a couple of days. He gets a DUI, and they don't screw around with DUIs in Kansas. So he goes to jail. He's in jail for like 2 weeks, and he gets his DUI, and we're like, all right, that's like. We're like, oh crap, whatever. I think we sent him money to help bail him out, like all this stuff. It was this big mess, and like we're starting to fight now because we kind of hate LA, and I'm like booking shows at like Viper Room and like the Whiskey and stuff on the Sunset Strip and Spaceland and
the kind of places where you have to like sell all your tickets to make money.
So that's like the Sunset Strip shows, but then we were also doing like stuff in Silver Lake, so like Spaceland and like Dragonfly in Hollywood, like the places that are like more like cool like hip DIY spots.
Sure.
And or at least, relative to the Sunset Strip. But we have all these, like, I'm like, cool, I'm like meeting people and like networking, and like our drummer, like we sent him some money to get him out of jail. He's coming. he gets a second DUI.
Oh no.
Goes to jail for like something like it was either like a month or 2 months or something like that. Is his second offense. They took away his license, so he's not allowed to have a license for like 10 years from like when they took it away. So it ends up that and his friend who he was moving to California with is now sleeping on our couch because he drove up from wherever he's from. I don't even remember. So there's like 7 of us living in a 3-bedroom apartment waiting for our drummer who's in jail in Kansas City. So we lived there for like a year. And
It's like a deleted scene from Spinal Tap.
Yeah, exactly. It was rough, and then like I like LA, and I love going to LA, and I like playing LA. But as Chicago people, and like the season's not changing, and everyone being like sort of either an actor or a musician, and you sort of have to explain that you're a musician, but you're not there because you think your dreams are gonna come true. Like
Right.
you're just like, no, I because you go. I don't know. You've been to LA, right?
I very briefly, but
So,
I haven't spent a ton of time
If
there.
you go anywhere, if you go to any party or any social whatever, the first you start talking to people and people are like, oh, so you were an actor or a musician? Like there's no third option, right?
Right.
And so you have to be like, well, I'm a musician, but like I'm not here because like I think LA is where everyone like gets discovered. Like so you have to say you're a musician, but you're here because your drummer is going to music school, but he's not here because he's in Kansas City in jail,
Right.
and all that stuff. So
you're there to work. You're not a doughy-eyed.
Right, exactly. Or like we're just here because of circumstance. So the long and
Right.
short of it is, after a while, we're all fighting, like girlfriends and people like not like wanting to like oh, is it me or the band, and like all this like early 20s melodrama bullshit.
Sure.
And like on steroids, and we're drunk all the time, we're on drugs all the time, we're like sad and angry, and like we have like a long and short of it, awful situation. Had a lot of great times there and a lot of bad times. Moved back to Chicago without the drummer. Got a new drummer.
Yeah.
Sort of reset. We lost like 9 months of our life, but given the information I had at the time, if that were all the information I had again right now, I would have made that same choice. So whether was it a good move or a bad move, I don't know. It was a life experience. So
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a wild time.
yeah, it was great.
And was this all? So is this all with your now current band or another?
No, this
band?
is like 3 bands ago.
3 bands ago, yeah, because I feel like the modern musician runs through bands like a lot in this current,
Especially in this town, because in this town people play in so many bands. Like me being in 2 bands is like less than
right.
a
You're
lot
not,
of people.
You're not doing enough. Like
Right,
it's
it's
the
like-
same with comedy. It's like you're a stand-up comedian. Well, are you doing 2 to 3 open mics every night? Are you producing minimum of 3 shows, 2 weeklies, a monthly, and then a quarterly where you can get famous people on? Are you doing a podcast? What kind of podcast?
Right.
What kind of podcast is it? Do you have another thing that you're working on? Are you writing?
Yeah.
Is your packet writing? I'm just like, at what point do we realize that we've let capitalism into our brains, and we like I have so many friends that just like the idea of like just taking a night off to go to movies is like that's self-care for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So what brought you to New York? When did you get to New York?
So like a few bands later, actually when we moved back to Chicago, the drummer that we got to replace the Kansas City jail drummer was
That's a song title, the Kansas City jail drummer.
Oh, I have so many of those in me. So he speaking again like transgendered person. At the time, now she. Currently, was the first drummer in the Samantha project that eventually evolved into a few steps later what this like now current band is.
Yeah.
So what happened was that lineup of that initial band was me, my friend Jordan, and this other friend of ours named Fred, who lived in Chicago. So Jordan, speaking of LA, this is where it all comes back. It's the whole reason why I'm bringing this whole thing up in the first place.
Okay.
Jordan, and this is before I quit drinking, because I'm a recovering alcoholic. So like the tail end of a lot of this is just like my life is in shambles. On top of like just like keeping myself together as a person is just like not happening, right?
Totally. Is there the moment in here where you're like, fuck, I got to get sober?
No, that happens later.
Okay.
A lot of other crappy things that happened to me first, but in the middle of all this, I'm like a functioning alcoholic, barely. My current wife is my girlfriend at the time. I'm just like constantly high, constantly drunk, like somehow holding jobs, and holding my bands together, but definitely like not. I'm becoming a less consistent player. Like there are times where I'm nailing it, and there are other times where I'm just falling off the stage. Right. So a lot of that mixed with like just some choices that Jordan was making at the time. She decided she's moving to LA, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm like,
I just got back from LA.
I know. I'm like, you're the one that replaced our LA situation, right? And so,
be like, I'm not doing that
in
again.
an old band. I was also in a band in between that band and this band. But so like I'm like, do I have to go back to LA? And in my like drunken, screwed up state, I'm like, the first thing I'm like, well, we're going back to LA. Like I didn't learn my lesson the first time. So our bass player, Fred, was like, I don't want to go to LA. And I'm like, well, we have to go to LA. Our drummer's amazing, and she's going to LA. And so luckily, Jordan sat me down and was like, don't follow me to LA. Like, I love you, and I love this band, but I need to be in LA, and I don't want you coming for me, right? So I'm like, I'm like crying because I'm like all drunk and emotional. I'm like, this just sucks, and I hate this. This is such a bad, like, fine, whatever. And so we don't go to LA, and I'm really upset about it. And then, like, I think that's when I got sober in the process there. So we decided we're staying in Chicago. We don't have a drummer. I'm looking for other drummers, and I don't have one. Fred and I are playing as a two-piece with a drum machine at the time, and what did I do? A bunch of other really bad things happened, which ended up with me getting sober. So I went to rehab and like did all that, which is like a whole other podcast story for another time.
Well, can you tell me what was the moment? What was like the condensed version of
the moment I got sober?
you realized you had to get sober?
So I had quit drinking once, briefly, to sort of before I understood how like what alcoholism and like how it works. Like I was just kind of like, I drink too much, and I've tried like I knew I was an alcoholic, but I was like, I need to dry out, like medically detox, because you can die if you're drinking the amount that I was drinking, and stop because you can have seizures and strokes and stuff. So I actually flew back to St. Louis because my mom is in like medical stuff, detoxed in St. Louis, and was like, cool, I like it's all out of my system, and I'm gonna go back to Chicago, and I'm going to just drink like a normal person. Like, well, and so like I wasn't married yet. Sarah, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was like, we have rules because we don't want to go down this, like, things are getting really bad for like a long period of time.
Sure.
So we're gonna have rules. Like, I don't drink by myself. She knows what's going on. I'm limited to certain amounts under certain occasions. Like I remember like Pride Parade was a big one where I'm like, we have to extend the rules because we're going to Pride Parade, and like, so like everyone's drinking, it's a parade, and we're in the streets. So like we would like scooch the like what I was allowed to do within like,
right,
depending on what was going on. Which was fine for like a month maybe.
Sure.
And then because like, it's a progressive disease that kills you and like picks right back up where it left off. Within 2 months, I was right back to where like 10 years of drinking had gotten me. And everything was awful again. Like, I mean, like, not to get into all of like that's a whole other like, I could tell that story, and it's not that I don't want to tell.
We can do episode. We can do another episode.
But what happened was, and then I ended up in the hospital, and this whole embarrassing situation with an ambulance, and like, escaping from the hospital, which still wasn't the end of that. That wasn't the end of it. But that's where I clearly, at this point, anyone would have like been like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? What it was I at that point I wasn't working. I was collecting unemployment, looking for a job, and Sarah was going to work, and I was drinking all day while looking for jobs and going on interviews and practicing and like playing music. And then I was great at like hiding and lying and all this stuff. But she'd come home and I'd be like wasted every night and be like, I'm not drinking. Like, we have rules. And she couldn't find or prove, other than the fact that I was clearly drunk.
Sure.
But she's like, I can't find where he's getting this. There's no receipts. There's no credit card trail. There's no bottles. Like, where is he getting, like, how is he doing this? Right.
Right.
So one day, and I'm like strapping down, like, no, I'm not doing anything. Like, you're crazy. I'm not drunk. I'm like clearly drunk. I was drinking and writing music and sending out resumes for jobs, and I passed out. I'm at home, and I woke up, and Sarah is standing there, and there's a bottle on the table, and she's just like, and I'm like, fuck. I was like, I like got caught like straight up like I've been lying, knowing that I'm gonna, and she's like, you need to figure out what you're gonna do, like, because I'm not doing this anymore. And I was like, yep, that's what I have to. And it wasn't about her and like being like, I'm doing this for you. It was the fact that I was caught in my own lie, that I couldn't like lie away to myself and like rationalize. It was like, no, this is just like black and white. Like I'm being a really shitty person. Not only am I clearly being a shitty person to like everyone, but like this is just like such a moment of like, yep, I'm being like a complete shithead. So that day I booked my flight and got set to go to rehab the following day. Went to rehab. Like dried out, like medically detoxed for a week, did 30 days in rehab, and that's coming up about 10 years ago.
Wow, so you're sober for 10 years.
Almost, yeah.
Congratulations, man. That's great. And God bless your wife. I can't imagine many women would have stayed in that situation.
No, she spent like 2 years. She was like, we were together for like almost 2 years of like the worst of my addiction problem. And I mean, and she can, at least could. Her tolerance is much lower now that we don't like drink all the time together. But she could drink anyone under the table, and she's like 4'11", 86 pounds, but she could drink like the biggest dude in the room down, right?
Yeah.
So like, a lot of it was like, at first it was like, oh, we just party a lot, but then it's like he never stops, and I know like I gotta like do shit tomorrow, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so like like for a little while it was fun, and then for like a long time it wasn't fun anymore.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
Wow. That's like after Vince Neil's car accident where he killed Razzle, and then he's trying to be sober while the rest of the band continues to be Motley Crue.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations, man. I'm glad you got through that. So how many years have you been in New York now?
6.
6 years in New York. And I'm curious about the music scene in New York, because I keep telling myself that I'm gonna like record and write some of these songs that I have that no one has heard. Like, where are you playing in New York? Where is someone who's like wants to play out? Where are like the cool spaces that bands play?
Well, your question is, do you want to know where the cool spaces to play, or do you want to know where the good starting out places are? Because that's a different question. Because the cool places, I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible to play the cool places if you're like a new band, but like,
I know you got to work.
But there's such a, for lack of a better term, pretension, especially in the Brooklyn scene, that it's like you have to like, which is so stupid. Again, going back to like like punk rock and like what is and what isn't. You have to like achieve this like unspoken level of something to play at various places sometimes, or like be like in with certain bands to be asked on to be on a bill. And so many places don't have like they have an email address on the website. You're like for booking, please contact so-and-so at gmail.com. But they don't actually respond to those emails. You have to like actually know the person that books and use their actual email at the place. So a lot of times you need to know the secret email address to get to,
So, well, why don't I ask you this then? Where are like the cool places that like punk rock and like pop and punk bands play in New York? Because I don't know any.
Yeah,
of those
so
places.
anything like noisy punk rock indie. You're looking at like the Glove. You're looking at like let's see, where else is like a really like Trans Pecos is really cool. Although they have like there's like a whole thing I could talk about that, but yeah, and then like some of the bigger spots actually you would think aren't like suited for it's like Secret Project Robot. I'm going back to some of the DIY spots that like we've either just recently played or I go to, like Rubalad, which used to be the old Secret Project Robot space. The new Secret Project Robot space is cool. But like things like Brooklyn Bazaar or what's another good a good one that is both cool and a good starting out spot would be like the Gutter.
Okay.
The Gutter I think was cool, like actually like cool in Williamsburg was cool when I first moved to New York, which is like right when I was like, oh, Williamsburg is cool, and I get here and I'm like, oh, what happened? Like where's all the Williamsburg stuff, because it's all in Bushwick now.
Yep.
So the Gutter I think was like on its way out when I first moved here, because I used to see a couple cool bands and I was like, no one plays at the Gutter anymore. And then the Gutter like went away from being like hip, and then it recently has like surged back up in the last couple of years, but it's also still, because I think it lost its like cachet for like 2 years, is still like easy to book, and you can like so you can be like a starting out band and you don't have to jump through all the hoops that you have to do to play, some of like the secret spots.
Sure. And do you tour outside of New York a lot?
Yeah.
What would be like some of your advice for like setting up like DIY tours?
There's a couple Facebook pages that are good for that, so especially on the East Coast. So for like anything from like pretty much the whole East Coast, it gets a little tricky when you get like to like Vermont and Maine and stuff. But like anything Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut. Wherever else, but all the way down. So there's other groups that are East Coast, but there's also like DC, Baltimore specific like ones, and then anything like Carolinas and like Georgia and Florida and that sort of stuff. So there's various Facebook groups, but really the best way is to either play some places, play a couple shitty shows in some of those towns, meet some of the bands. And it's the same thing as playing here, but just like on a smaller degree. You play places that you don't know. You meet some people who tell you, oh, next time you come through, you shouldn't play here. You should play this place.
Okay.
Or you play with a band from one of those places here, or happenstance somewhere else where like you're a New York band on a bill and there's like, you know, a Raleigh band on the bill with you, but you're playing in like Columbus or something like that. And they're like, oh, we really love you guys. Like next time you're in, you know, Raleigh, like, you know, and then you're like, oh, now we know people in Raleigh and we can we can you know, book a show like that. But there's various pages and Facebook things. And I think Greg Hansen from King Pizza either put together or has been like updating like this master spreadsheet that's in some sort of like collective Brooklyn band music docs that we all somehow have access to, that keeps getting updated with like, you know, places that like aren't like safe spaces or places that are like, you know, awesome to play and like super trans friendly or like, you know, like that, like that sort of stuff.
Do you know Matt Pless?
Yes.
Yeah, he's a Baltimore guy. I remember going to see his old band Three Prong Outlet when I was in high school. You guys should do a show together. I bet that would be a great lineup.
Yeah,
because I really enjoy his acoustic stuff. And one other thing, what is because I remember when we were messaging to set this up, you were telling me some of your upcoming like recording and touring schedule, and I'm just like,
yeah,
Jesus Christ! So you've got. How many albums or EPs does the band have?
There's the current band. How many do we have?
Yeah.
So there's the two or three Samantha. Those albums. There's still like one or two songs that we play from those. So those are kind of still included in the catalog. But the first like Nihiloceros EP is just the one that came out like a little over a year ago. So there's one straight on, and on Spotify there's the second. Like, I don't know if you looked. So, like, there's the Nihiloceros EP that came out end of 2017. And then I also released, like, a list of tracks from those previous albums that we still play live. The first Samantha album, we don't play anything off of it all because that's, like, ages ago. It feels like 2 bands ago, even though,
gotcha.
Right. So there's really just the one, and now we're recording
the next one.
The next one, yeah.
Nice. And when do you think that'll be coming out?
I'm thinking fall, because we're recording drums in May. It's a weird schedule. So like we played like, I don't know, between both bands I did like 100 shows last year,
nice.
Which is why we were on like the hardest working bands like Baby's Alright show and all that stuff. So I basically for the last, and we've been donating all this money to like so we made a bunch of money and gave it all away, which was cool. But we played all these shows and like we just kept playing them. I kept being like, we're working on it, like bits of new things, but we're not getting anywhere with them because all we're doing is we're either touring or we're playing here, and we played a crap ton of shows here. So I'm like, we're never actually going to finish that unless we carve out time. So I was like, and at this point, Treads had taken a little break, which was cool because there was a period last summer, especially with like the Warped Tour dates and everything,
right,
where I was playing. There was like weeks where even in town, not even counting tour, there were like weeks in town where I was playing like between the two bands like 6 shows, and it's like
damn.
And they weren't all every day. So they would be like I'd be playing like 2 shows, or I'd play 2 shows, but then like Nihiloceros has 2 shows that night, and Treads has a show that we're on the same bill. So I'm playing 2 shows and running and playing another show. It was insane. So like we decided, okay, our last show is going to be mid-December, and then we're going to take like the holidays off to like start working on the record and like dive in, because the only way we're actually going to get it done.
Right.
So then our last show is supposed to be like December 18th or something like that at Alphaville. That's another good spot in Alphaville.
Okay.
So we did our last show of the year at Alphaville, and that's when I went home for Thanksgiving, and I had booked the show at Bowery Electric in the city. So it was gonna be our one-off January show, and then I got offered the Baby's All Right show because we were on the Oh My Rockness list. So I was like, fuck, we have to take it. We can't not play a packed show at Baby's All Right. So we played 2 shows in January, which bled into the new year. They were both amazing shows, like packed and fun and like blast. The lineups on both were amazing. So it's definitely worth doing. It was a good way to like, and this is how we're gonna take a break, right? So we were planning on taking off the end of January, February, and March. So, but then I was on a cruise for like the first week of February, and then Alex, our bass player, went skiing in Vermont like the second week, and then Gabe had to go back to Chicago. So we lost most of February. We were all working independently and like sending demos back and forth, but we lost a lot of like room time.
Sure.
In the meantime, Tread starts coming back, and like Tread just started playing shows again, but Tread is working on new music. So I had planned to be done with writing by now, and then start working on Tread stuff, but it's sort of like now our stuff pushed, and then Tread stuff sort of bled over. So now I'm like working on 2 new sets of songs at the same time and further behind where I want it to be. So we booked drums in the studio for mid-May, and then we will, and then I'm going to Puerto Rico for like my 9-year wedding anniversary, and then I'm coming back, and then when I'm back from that's when we're going to do guitars and vocals and all that stuff, and then hopefully it'll be done in June so that we can mix and master all in that month, and then do like prep time for like any sort of like PR or like label stuff we want to do to have it out by fall, because like if I don't get it out by fall, I don't want to put it out in the winter, so
yeah, kind of dead zone.
Yeah, so we're really trying to make this like a early fall release.
Awesome, man. Well, I think you're going to do it. Do you want to play a song now?
Sure.
Okay, so what's the first one we're going to do?
This is the hit track off of the EP that we put out last with the it's called Anus, A.N.U.S. So,
cool.
Yeah, I could tell you about that later. All right, so let's okay. Wait, hold on, because I don't usually play this. Okay. Are you good? Are we good?
Yep.
Right.
Whenever you're ready.
I've got a secret in ya. I've got this heart of carbon. It stands to reason for ya. It's only chalk and coal. Etch out my niche in the dark. Wreck the pearly world. We leave the smirk and the snark. We're catatonic fools. Right future, yes, I'm my name, right future, right future, right future, yes, I'm my name, right future. About time acknowledge this cough and narcoleptic sloth. Guitar bomb never went off, just left us feeling warm. And one more secret in ya, this heart's not made of carbon. Amino sequence stretches all tongue and teeth and bone. Right future, you saw my name, right future, right future, right future, you saw my name, right future, right future, right future, you saw my name, right future, right future, right future, you saw my name, right future.
Kick ass, dude.
Cool, thank you.
That sounded great. Do you have any anything you do when for singing that kind of style so you don't lose your voice?
No, I just usually take better care of it before I know I'm going to be performing a lot, which I just haven't been. I've just been smoking and not. I've also been because I've been working on the new stuff, and so I've been screaming, and I do backup vocals and treads, and I'm doing a Lillingtons cover set for the Punk Island thing in 2 weeks, so some of that registers higher than mine. So because I've just been practicing, I've been singing a lot more than you should if you're going to be using your voice to perform. Right?
Gotcha.
Because you're just when you're playing a song 20 times, where it's I wouldn't need to scream this part 20 times if we were just playing shows, but you're practicing it, and they're but we need you to do it because we need the vocal cue, and I'm dude, I can only scream this so many times before.
Totally.
So yeah, I don't do the best job at taking care of my voice in those situations. I'm gonna try to play there's this bass part that I'm gonna try to. I don't play. I play a solo, but I'm gonna try to incorporate that to make it work acoustically. So this will be an experiment.
Cool.
I don't even know if I don't have all the lyrics written, so some of this might be gibberish.
It's all good. And then when you listen to it on the record, you'll be like, oh, I heard the beginnings of that song.
Oh man, remember when he didn't know what he was doing? All right, am I good to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Echoes the sightless. This tall man is made of bones, bones and dry hands, hands made for sifting through caramel ash that dust one broken last right. Clean erased and we go in silence. Plaster bomb, whipple bent powder hangs on. Plaster bomb, whipple bent powder hangs on. Old gears keep winding through dusty long ago. 10 years of blind spots. Watch as we grind down envy to diamond lung grease. I lost the air. Sharp hairs remind me we go where timeless. Plaster bomb, whipple bent powder hangs on. Plaster bomb, whipple bent bomb.
Nice, dude.
Cool.
Dude, that chorus is super catchy.
Cool, thank you.
Dig it a lot, man. That's great. Thank you again so much for doing this, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Of course. I think, am I still on?
Yeah. I got one more thing to ask.
Sure.
If people want to look up your stuff, where can they find it?
One of the good things about doing the name change is we went from being one of the hardest bands to search to the easiest, because there's only one Nihiloceros on the internet. So it's nihiloceros.com, at Nihiloceros at Instagram, Nihiloceros on Facebook, Nihiloceros on Twitter, Nihiloceros on all my rockness. So basically, if you Google Nihiloceros, it's the only, like, nothing but us will come up. So I should spell it: Nihiloceros. Nihiloceros.
Excellent. Thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
That's the life of a musician in New York City, folks. And I love the two songs he played. The new stuff sounds like it's going to be really good, even just hearing it in its very unfinished form on acoustic. So after that gets the full studio treatment, I think that'll be pretty awesome. An awesome track. So guys, thank you again so much for listening. If you want to follow Nihiloceros, I'll have the links in the description so you can check out that stuff. And Mike's just a really creative guy. He's high energy, and he's excited about what he's doing, and that's kind of infectious to just be around that. So I was super inspired by that chat. If you guys enjoyed this, please tell a friend. I would greatly appreciate it. You can leave a rating or subscribe on iTunes. You can add us to your favorite playlists on Stitcher. If you want to let Spotify know that I submitted the show, I'm still waiting to hear back. I want to get the show on Spotify also, but it's taking a little bit longer. But right now we're on iTunes and Stitcher. You can like the Facebook page Between Awesome and Disaster on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter at Comic Will Carey, and you can follow the podcast on Twitter at AwesomeDpod. Thank you guys again for listening, and I will see you next week Between Awesome and Disaster. Take care, everybody.